Welcome to Strategy 2050 review and analytical internet portal. I'm your host, Aselia Stubaldna, and this is Live in KZ program, where we tell the stories of foreign citizens living in Kazakhstan. Our first guest speaker is Christoph Mohr, Regional Director for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan at Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Christoph, thank you for joining us today. If you could tell us, how long have you been in Kazakhstan so far?
Hi, it's good to be with you today. I arrived in Kazakhstan more than 2.5 years ago, a little more, in March 2019.
And so far, what have been your impressions about the country?
Well, there have been many, obviously. The country is big, and due to the pandemic, I haven't seen that much. But it's a diverse country, so I met many people, as you can imagine. And the country is beautiful, people are friendly. One of the first things I noticed about Kazakhstan is that it's a family country, a lot of kids. Differences are quite obvious between cities and rural areas, but so far it has been interesting, though I have to say I want to see more.
And if you could tell us what have been the challenges so far?
Well, you know, when you move to a different country, or generally move, always, you know, challenges arise. Every move is about a new environment, new people, in my case, a new language. And that's one of the major challenges I have been facing so far as a private person, meaning that I started to learn Russian from scratch when arriving in Kazakhstan. That's a challenge, obviously. Also adapting to the aforementioned new environment. I have been living in a much warmer climate before. So that's something you have to get used to. The winters are very different.
Yeah.
But also daily life looks different depending on, you know, where you are and what you do. But these challenges I like about the job. I like about the rotation system I'm in. Because they force you to do something new, to do something different, and that, you know, forces you to adapt. And if you want to progress in life, I firmly believe then you need to sometimes get out of your comfort zone. And
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So you've said that you want to see more in Kazakhstan, and if you could tell us what are some of the cities that you have already had a chance to visit here?
You know, I feared that question really, because I only have been to the capital, Nur-Sultan, and Almaty, where I live. And you know, when you arrive to a new country, in the beginning it's always very busy, adjusting to the new work, the new position, the new people around you, the new country. So you're busy, and then naturally you just postpone everything to the next year. And that's very much what I did. But next year was 2020, and then the pandemic hit the country and the world, and that translated into me just being in these two cities.
And if you had a chance to use only 3 words to describe your general impression about Kazakhstan, what would they be?
Gosh, that's not easy to answer. First,
no easy questions.
First, it's different, obviously. Different, and I mean, I started to describe the differences already to what I experienced in life earlier. But different also in a good way. So this is not meaning that, you know, differences are necessarily bad or only challenges. Not really. They're also good. Kazakh people tend to be so much more pragmatic than we Germans are. That's a good difference I enjoy very much. The 2 others are for me quite simple. Change and center. And let me explain why. Change, because Kazakhstan is a dynamic and ever-changing country. You could see this sort of everywhere. I've been multiple times, quite regularly, I have to say, here in the capital. And the city changes day by day, week by week. You have so many constructions going on. There's new, you know, restaurants everywhere. So a lot of change is visible, just like in your daily routine, but also politically, the economy, with the pandemic, and, you know, the discussions around post-pandemic recovery, and all of this lot of change. For me, Kazakhstan is, again, a dynamic country, a country where you can see a lot of change on so many different levels. And center, because Kazakhstan, and that's a similarity between Kazakhstan and Germany, is at the very center of Central Asia, but not just in the region. Not sure if that's geographically correct, it might not be. But Kazakhstan is at the center between West and East, North and South, and also a center in the region. So for me, yes, center, change, and the difference, or that's sort of how I try to sum up my experience so far.
So you already mentioned the similarities between Kazakhstan and Germany, and if you could also elaborate on the similarities that you see between people in Kazakhstan and in Germany.
I mean, there's some. I try to describe them. I would say both countries and the people in those countries share that they're part of the globalized world. But also, at the same time, both countries have very, very different environments, meaning rural areas. There's a strong divide in both countries between rural areas and urban city centers. So in my country, in Germany, for example, in Berlin, how people live, how they talk, what they do, might look very, very differently to what people in rural areas, where I'm originally from. I've lived in Berlin for a while, but originally I come from a very rural area, and their life looks very, very differently than what I experienced in our capital. And that, I assume, is very, very similar to Kazakhstan. Astana, Nur-Sultan, is a vibrant global city. Almaty is very different, but also similar to some extent. And I assume in rural areas, again, I haven't been there that much, a little outside of Almaty. Life is different, people are different, and that's interesting. But the most, I would say, obvious similarity, if you allow me, it's almost like a joke, is the love for cars, really. Kazakh people, I mean, at least that's visible in the capital and in Almaty. They love their cars, and that's very, very true in the sort of the capital of the car production, which is Germany, obviously, and we also love our cars. So that was one of the big surprises I had in the beginning. I'd never seen that many German cars.
So moving forward to the work you're doing here in Kazakhstan, as I know the foundation, the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, devotes a significant attention to the work with youth and young people in general. And I would like to know, why do you think that is important, especially at these times?
Well, true. We work here, and we work here on youth, but Friedrich Ebert Foundation does much more than that. Let me start with what you just asked with youth. We have a rich tradition in this, and not just globally, not just in Central Asia, not just in Kazakhstan, but that stems from, let's say, the roots of the foundation that has been indeed political education of the working class people. We're almost 100 years old, and that was, from the start, one of the most crucial, one of the most important topics of the foundation. And in our work abroad, we also do somewhat educational work. It depends on the country context and on the scope of the mission there. In Kazakhstan, the reason why we work a lot focused on youth is essentially that just start with the median age here, right? If my information is correct, it's 29. So Kazakhstan is very much a young country. Not just historically, with like 30 years of history of the country, but also, again, with the average age or the median age, rather, of 29. So youth is a crucial player in the country, just like from the size of the population, and also, obviously, because of their role in the future of this country. Youth, essentially, and it sounds almost like from some from some fortune cookie, but youth indeed is the future of this country, isn't it? And by supporting the development of young people, by supporting them in their position on major questions of our shared lifetime. We sort of help to build their capacity and their potential role in the future.
Yes. So as we started to talk about the work of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Kazakhstan, could you tell us more about what the foundation is doing besides youth empowerment activities?
Sure. We're in this country for almost 30 years. I believe 2023 we turn 30 in Kazakhstan. And during this time we established various programs. We work with different partners. They range from state partners. We work with the High Court. We work also with the Kazakh Institute for Strategic Studies under the President. We work with trade unions. We work with civil society organizations, but also, again, with youth, or academia, ministries, akimats. It really depends. So the plethora I described on the partner side, that also applies to the topics. So most of the topics stem from the global big questions.
Yes.
One, for example, is climate change.
Sure.
So this is something we Germans, we also share that with Kazakhstan and the youth and various actors of this country. And by having exchange, by having conversations, by doing joint work, we create joint knowledge, and we share that. And we believe that that's for the better good, not just from our side, but also for our Kazakh partners. And so let me further elaborate a little. So we work on the big questions, again, climate change, youth is a topic. We work on judiciary reform with some state bodies. We work very much in dialogue on civil society engagement in this society, in this country. So it depends, really. Of course, a lot is devoted also to foreign policy, to regional integration, to Kazakh's voice on a global stage, to big questions.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot going on here in this country, and we try to be a vital part in this conversation.
Again, returning back to the questions of youth empowerment, and with your knowledge of German politics and the time that you have been here and you had a chance to see how the Kazakhstan is moving in this direction, could you tell us about some differences and maybe similarities between the roles that young people are playing in Kazakhstan and in Germany?
What we're seeing for, I would say, a couple of years now in Germany is that young people drive, to some extent, the political agenda. Let me give you a good example, and you probably have heard of Friday for Futures. It's not a German phenomenon, it's not just happening in Germany or in the streets of Berlin, but globally. This very much was strong in Germany and still is. So one can go as far, if you want, to say that young people put climate change on the agenda of German politics. Not in general, like this has been a topic obviously before, but the necessity to address this was much increased by many young people roaming the streets and being very vocal about their take and their opinion on how climate change should be addressed within German politics. And that's something we have been seeing for quite some time in Germany now, that young people are active, that they are engaged in these conversations, and again, that they're actually driving some of these conversations. Many new members of parliament are young people throughout all parties, almost all parties, and they play a crucial role in the big conversations after the German election, how our country should look like, how the economy should look like, how transformation of public services, how digital they should look like, how mobility should look like in the future. Again, climate change. And in Kazakhstan, my experience so far is that people are, especially young people, are a bit more outside of this conversation. They tend to be, and one of our recent studies that is going to be published in about 2 weeks, a study on youth in Kazakhstan, finds that young people in Kazakhstan still perceive politics as something they don't want to be that much actively engaged with.
Yeah.
That's potentially changing in the future, but they identify that as something they rather not do right now. And I think that's a major difference, but also that's part of the story why we are, as Friedrich Ebert Foundation, engaged in this arena, because again, we believe young people are the future and their opinion matters in these questions.
Exactly.
And they should be part of the larger conversation.
And why do you think young people in Kazakhstan prefer to stay away from the politics, or should I say be apolitical?
I wouldn't go as far saying that they are apolitical. I've met so many young people that are quite the opposite, right? They have an opinion, and they are homo politicus, if you know what I mean. Like, they don't even notice maybe, but they are, absolutely in the day-to-day conversations, they have an opinion, and they want to be in this conversation. I believe they also, for historic reasons, they haven't been that much part of these larger conversations, these conversations between state and civil society.
Yes.
But again, this is changing. I named change to be one of my key impressions to the country, and I assume that young people will find an into this policy making process. So far, again, that hasn't been happening that much. Maybe I'm not in the position to advise the government or parties here or other bodies, but maybe how they are engaged in politics is not a perfect fit right now for young people, for the newer generation. And in my country, that also has been a major problem for years, that parties and the political organizations that not necessarily find the language of the youth, if you want to call it as such. And young people these days, they're global, they are digital, they speak a very, very different language than the older generation. That's true for all countries. And speaking this language in, let's say, a more traditional arena, such as politics, it's not that easy. Politics is about consistency, stability, different, processes. And they're not that dynamic and adjustable. And young people are exactly that. They're dynamic, everything is custom made these days, everything is quick. And politics sometimes is a little reluctant, a little slow, a little, not speaking the language necessarily of young people. And that's, again, a global challenge. And we're working to link these two dimensions with each other better.
But it should be changed, right? I mean, you said that politics remain reluctant, but I guess that it's something that we, as a community, need to change, and young people should certainly play a very important role in that. And I would like to know what would be your recommendations for opening more channels for young people to say, to be heard, to have a voice, even though some of them want to stay a bit away from the politics?
First of all, you would need to start to define what politics actually is, because I sometimes believe there's a misconception what we're actually talking about. Sure, you can talk about high politics, like what is happening on a national level, between state leaders, between governments, on a macroeconomic level, about inflation and, all of these things. But this is not politics per se. Sure, it is politics indeed, but so is what is happening in your local village, in your local community, if this road is built or not, if the school gets different funding. There's so many examples on various governance arenas, like from the very top of a state to the lowest village level, what actually politics is. And that is the first thing one needs to do, to tell young people politics is not just what is done in parliament, what is done between presidents and state leaders. It's what's happening in your everyday life, in your communities, in everything between you and the rest of us, right?
Yes.
So that's the first thing one needs to do. Get this to another approachable level, that young people lose this perception that's out there, that's far away, that's something I can never be. I can never be member of parliament or a minister. Lower it a little. Maybe you cannot be the minister, you don't need to.
Yes.
But you could be a mayor, you could be a community leader, you could somebody that brings about change to your village, right? That's also politics. That's the first recommendation. Make it attainable, make it accessible, make it something that like actually is perceivable. Then, of course, again, language needs to adjust, not just specifically in Kazakhstan, but globally. Young people need to be addressed better. They need to be included better. They have to be taken seriously. That's one strong recommendation. And that's something we also learned during this Friday for Future marches in Germany, that this can't be just like, you know, just ridiculed and just put aside. It's something actually very, very serious.
Yes.
And that's one step, taking what they say seriously, including them in the discussions, giving them a voice, addressing them accordingly, open institutions for them. Yeah, that's what I would do. And create experience, create you know, different ways of opening pathways for them to get there, to be a role model for others. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we all see and know, we have been through a very difficult and unprecedented year and still continue to do so. And the pandemic has changed everything in our lives, the way we talk, the way we meet, the way we go to visit public places, certainly. And as we're talking about politics, what do you think are the biggest challenges and impact that the pandemic had on politics?
That's a tough one, obviously, and a huge question. I would say, obviously, first of all, one has to acknowledge the lives lost.
Yes.
The toll that had on humankind globally, on families, on everything, virtually. That's obviously the first thing one has to be acknowledged. Then the impact on the economy, on workers that have been let go, on people that lost source of income, livelihoods, healthcare workers that have been, you know, paying quite some tribute to this whole pandemic. So the strongest question for the future I see is post-pandemic recovery of the economy, and finding a way globally to work better together in a multilateral system. Because, I mean, just take a look at the rates of vaccinations globally. They differ quite substantially. While some countries barely hit the 1% mark, others are with like 90% vaccinated. So fairness and fair distribution of vaccine, access to vaccine is a question that is still huge.
Yeah.
We're not past the pandemic. We're in the pandemic right now. Economic recovery, again, is a huge question for all of the countries working together. But also domestically in Kazakhstan, we're not through yet, I believe.
Yes.
So keeping up vaccination is crucial, I assume. There has been quite substantial success in the last month. But I believe that is also crucial to extend this program and you know, have a higher vaccination rate for the winter that is coming quite soon.
So the Friedrich Ebert Foundation has recently published a book on Kazakhstan and media and the way media has portrayed the COVID-19 in Kazakhstan. Could you tell us about some of the main takeaways of this monograph?
Sure. The main takeaways are quite simple. Kazakhstan is, in this regard, no exception. Most countries, also mine, have seen a lot happening in social media, a lot meaning conspiracy theories, fake information, where mostly, you know, with a certain reason in mind, false news have been shared to influence public discourse, to influence politics. And we have seen that this has harmed the response government was trying to mount against this pandemic coming to our countries. So Kazakhstan has experienced that as other countries. We have seen information out there that led people to believe that vaccines are unsafe, that they are chips by some tech leader, and you know all the scenarios and stories I'm referring to. But there it's saddening, but it's the truth that this country, as so many, have been hit by a wave, I'd say, of misinformation, and has to some extent badly paid for having this in the public discourse.
And why do you think that is the case, that people can so easily believe in all those conspiracy theories and fake news?
I mean, the internet is big and broad, right?
Yeah.
And information is out there. But what information is and what's factual and scientific based, what is based on research, it's not always, you know, understandable and easily consumable for everybody. Sometimes you cannot distinguish fake information from actual scientific research-based news, right?
Yes.
Sometimes that's very, very hard for people. Sometimes it's basically easier to just believe or read what you already believe. It's sort of I would say strengthening your already existing beliefs, right? So for people, it's hard to know what's actually true and what not. That's one. And second, this is done intentionally and it's done professionally. We have seen this, let's say, in the 2015 campaign of Donald Trump, that I'm not going to go into detail, but that some shared information intentionally to influence voter behavior. And it's the same with the pandemic. This is done and almost crafted, handcrafted for recipients to consume, to influence behavior in a certain way. And don't be fooled. It's done professionally, and this leads people down a road that is paved with lies and misconception and just fake information to steer up this different response, right?
So going back to the bilateral cooperation between Kazakhstan and Germany, how would you evaluate the cooperation that the two countries have already, and what do you think are the prospects?
Well, one, first of all, has to say that the friendship between Kazakhstan and Germany remains strong. And you could, if you want to, visualize this, just imagine or visualize the president of Kazakhstan, Mr. Tokayev, coming to Berlin. It was a very warm delegation, a very warm official visit. And that is, I would say, it's quite painting a picture of the friendship in an obvious way. That's one, that the friendship between the countries remains strong. Second is obviously you have many German organizations and or companies in your country. It's not just Friedrich Ebert Foundation, but there are other foundations. We have a very active embassy. We have organizations like DAAD and Goethe Institute that facilitate exchange in the academic arena, exchange between students and universities. So a lot of German organizations are within the country. If you would ask me what to do more, how to bolster this, what are the future prospects, I would say more of this, more of the exchange programs, more of bilateral cooperation, but also in a multilateral setup, more work together between the two countries. But going back to, let's say, a private question even of my own experience, I highly profited in the past of exchange. I was part of the Erasmus program. It's a program in Europe that allows you and facilitates exchange between the European countries when you're a student. And I did that, and I highly profited of the experience. So I'm saying that this exchange between the two countries, between students, for example, that's a way that is also needed in the future and should be, extended and broadened, and I believe that's crucial. But also, obviously, as a head of a German organization that is active on the ground here, I believe we are already doing good work together. The countries are, again, not just friends, but also having a lot of different exchange fora, institutions. There's a parliamentary group in the German parliament that is, designated to the partnership and friendship to Kazakhstan. So also many families have roots in both countries. So I would say more of everything I mentioned, and on the same level, meaning this level of friendship that is already existing and should be built on.
Thank you for joining us today, Christoph.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.